Hey guys, so today we're checking out the K&N Series 77 High Flow Performance Cold Air Intake fitting all 2012 to 2018 at 3.6 liter JK Wranglers. So if you're in search of some better performance for your 3.6 liter, a cold air intake is always a great solution, and this option by K&N will be a premium choice to take a look at. Now this intake will do a great job at getting rid of that restriction that your factory airbox had, replacing it with a high flow setup that will help your engine breathe a lot better. Now by increasing that airflow, you'll also be getting some better horsepower and torque and even some better fuel efficiency. When it comes to the horsepower increase, K&N lists a 10 horsepower increase at 5,600 RPM, so keep in mind that those horsepower increases will be at the higher RPM range where Jeep owners really don't spend a lot of time, but you definitely will feel a little bit in your throttle response, especially when you're getting on the gas, like when you're getting on the highway. And this won't just help with airflow, but it's also going to optimize your filtration, and this kit will come with a high quality oiled filter that will trap all those contaminants before getting into the intake system, and it's also going to be cleanable and reusable for the lifetime of your Wrangler. A specific kit will also come with a heat shield application to prevent any hot engine bay air from getting to the filter, but I would keep in mind if you do go off-road in a wetter climate where you come into contact with a lot of mud or water often, I would just keep that in the back of your head that this is not going to be as protective as the factory airbox or an enclosed airbox option. So I would recommend this to somebody who's in a drier climate, doesn't really get near any water or any mud often, and really wants something that's going to give them a lot of performance when it comes to that airflow. Now while we're on the topic of the heat shield, it is going to be made of a steel construction. It's also going to have a nice textured black powder coat finish on top to make sure that it's protected from the elements. So if you get any water on the heat shield, it's not going to rust or show any signs of corrosion. And I do like the fact that you also get a little stamp of the K&N right over on the side of that. Gives a little bit of a sporty touch or some branded styling underneath the hood. Now speaking of underneath the hood, you're also going to get a large aluminum intake tube. This is going to give you a very sporty look, especially with the polished finish, but as you can see, this is going to be a straight through style and it's going to be very large in comparison to the factory setup. That's going to get rid of a lot of restriction. The factory airbox or the factory intake tube does have a resonator on it, so getting rid of that is really where you're going to get a lot of this airflow here. Not to mention, it's going to come with everything that you need. All of these seals, all the fittings, the clamps, everything that you need when it comes to the hardware, and this is not going to require a tune, making it just that much more straightforward when it comes to install. Now when it comes to the price, this will come in at roughly $500, putting this at a pretty average price point for a premium or high quality intake system. Now other options on the page may come in different configurations as well as different style components that will change up the performance slightly, and it will kind of come down to your personal preference on what you prefer. Now for example, some other choices may come with a dry filter instead of an oiled filter that this kit has. Some people prefer a dry filter, that they feel they get a little bit more airflow with this, but when it comes to an oil filter, some people feel like there's a little bit better filtration. The difference is very slight, but if you are a fan of an oiled filter, then this kit is going to be right up your alley. Not to mention, there are other options that will not come with a heat shield, and they'll come with an airbox design for a little bit of extra protection in comparison to this. Then you're going to see some other choices that will have a different style change. So instead of a polished aluminum intake tube, you'll see textured black, you'll see plastic options, or different colored options. Now in my opinion, I think if you're looking for a premium choice when it comes to really high airflow for a cold air intake, you're not really worried about being too protected when it comes to the filter, and you're really looking for a sporty look underneath the hood, then this is going to be a great choice. Now like I mentioned before, the install will be pretty straightforward at a 1 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter. Again, you're not going to need a tune with this, making it very easy. You will need some basic hand tools, and it's probably going to take you about an hour to get the job done. Now one of our installers here is going to show you what that install looks like step by step. So that wraps it up for my review. Let's go ahead and get into the install.
For this installation, the tools you'll need include a tape measure, a marker, a ratchet, a short and long extension, 8 and 10 millimeter sockets, a 4 millimeter hex socket, a 10 millimeter wrench, a pair of snips or dikes, and a trim removal tool. What's up guys? Today I'm going to show you how to install a K&N cold air intake into your 12 to 18 Wrangler JK with the 3.6 liter. To get started with the uninstallation, we're gonna go underneath the hood here. We're gonna take off the engine cover, then remove the bolts from the air intake pipe, and also loosen the clamps. To do that, we're gonna need a 10mm socket, an 18mm socket, and an impact or a ratchet. The first step is to remove the engine cover so that we can get to our intake clamp. We're at our rear intake clamp right now, which is right here. So I'm going to use my 8mm socket with an extension and my impact in order to loosen that up. Next, we're going to remove these two 10mm bolts right here that hold the intake pipe on. So I'm going to take my impact and 10mm socket and get those free. All right, before we remove our air intake box and pipe, there is an intake air temperature sensor right here. It's kind of hard to see on camera, but it's pretty close to the throttle body. And it just has a push type connector. So you just have to push in the pin and pull it out. Okay, now we have two 10mm bolts that need to be removed. One is right here next to the fuse box, and the other is right over here, right below the radiator cap. So let me grab my 10mm socket with impact. Again, this one's a little hard to see on camera, but it is right underneath the radiator cap. And then a note about this bolt here is you want to save it because we are going to be reusing it later. All right, we're ready to remove our air intake box and pipe. First thing you want to do, just make sure that you have the coolant hose removed from the brackets, and then you can pull up on the air intake box and hose and get it out of the engine bay. With our factory air intake out, we're going to prep it so we can get the air intake temperature sensor out of it in order to put it into the K&N. I have a flathead screwdriver and a 9mm wrench in order to do that. So with my flathead screwdriver, I'm going to pry this little tab up very gently. Like I said, this is fragile. So once we have it lifted up above the lip, I'm going to twist it ever so slightly. Okay, now that we have it turned a little bit, I'm just going to use my 9mm just so I'm not putting any clamping pressure on it, and it just turns just that little bit more. And then I can't overstate, just to be very careful, just give it a little wiggle, pull it out. All right guys, there's a little bit of pre-assembly we have to do on our K&N intake before we can put it into our car. As you can see, I have a bunch of pieces here, but not to worry, I'm going to take you through it step by step. Okay, here we have a mounting stud and a Z-bracket. So you want to install these first, and we're going to use the supplied M6x16 hex stud, and also a lock washer and a washer. So we're just going to do these hand tight for now, but when it's time for full assembly, we're going to use our 10mm socket. Again, same on this one. M6 nut by 16, lock washer and washer. Okay, now these are going to go onto our heat shield bracket here. Now we're going to take our mounting studs and brackets, mount them onto our heat shield, and make sure you have them in the right orientation like I have it here. And again, M6x16 bolt, with just a washer. Let me show you this real quick. With just a washer, no lock washer. And on the other side, the M6 nylon nut. So it's a locking nut. So again, you make sure you have that in the right position, the right direction. Okay. And this one I'm just going to put on a little bit for now, and we'll tighten it down when we are finalized. All right, so those two brackets are mounted. Now we can move on to our adapter plate. All right, now moving over to our intake adapter. We're gonna place this on our heat shield. And when we spin it around, we can see that on the intake adapter, we have threads that we have to line up with these holes. Then we're gonna take M6 button head bolts with a washer and lock washer to secure this in place. Just get a couple threads in for now. All right, now that we have all of that together, we can tighten everything down. For the intake adapter bolts, we're going to need a 4mm hex head socket and a ratchet, of course. All right, and then for the first brackets we installed, we're going to need a 10mm wrench with a 10mm socket. And I'm just actually going to rotate this way so I can get to it. Now again, for these, you don't want to over tighten them at this point because we are going to need to adjust them in order to fit everything into place. So I'm just going to give them just a slight snug, but they are still able to be moved around. Okay, good. For this step, guys, we're gonna do some pre-assembly on the K&N intake before we put it in the car. I have a whole bunch of parts here, so I'm gonna break them down for you so you know what to grab out of the kit. For the pre-assembly, you'll need 2 of the nylon locking nuts, 8 of the flat washers, 7 of the locking washers, 4 of the M6 by 16mm hex head bolts, 2 of the M6 by 12mm hex head bolts, 2 of the M6 by 16mm button head bolts, 1 of the M6 by 12mm button head bolts, 2 of the plastic mounting studs, 2 of the Z brackets for the heat shield, the long L bracket for the heat shield, the rubber mounted stud, the heat shield itself, the filter adapter, and the tools we'll need: a ratchet, I prefer an extension, and a 10mm socket, a 4mm hex head socket, and a 10mm wrench. First, we're going to need 2 of the M6 by 16mm hex head bolts with a flat washer and locking washer on each of them, and the 2 Z brackets. Now for the Z brackets, I want to mention there is a short side and a long side, and what we're going to be doing is mounting the plastic studs onto the long side of the Z bracket. And I'm just going to hand tighten these for now so that we can adjust as needed. And then these are being mounted onto our heat shield. And to mount onto the heat shield, we're gonna grab 2 more of the M6 by 16 millimeter hex head bolts with a washer on each of those, and then 2 more washers for the other side of the heat shield, and the 2 nylon locking nuts. All right, so bolt goes through. Put another flat washer on, and then the nylon nut. Same for this one. And then let's just tighten that down a little bit using our 10 mil wrench, 10 mil socket. And we don't want to go super tight, we just want to snug it down a little bit so that we can adjust these brackets as needed. All right, now let's move on to the L bracket. We're going to mount the rubber mounted stud onto the L bracket in this orientation using one of our M6 12 millimeter hex head bolts with a lock washer and a flat washer. So as you can see, there's a threaded hole in the rubber mounted stud. So our bolt threads into it. And we're just going to keep that hand tight for now, but it needs to be installed in this orientation. All right, let's move on over to our filter adapter. We're going to mount it into our heat shield as such. And as you can see, there's holes in the back of the heat shield. So you have to line up the threaded holes in the adapter with the holes in the heat shield. Then we're going to take 2 of our M6 by 16 millimeter button head bolts. Each of them, we're going to take 2 of these, each of them with a flat washer and a locking washer. Thread them into our adapter. Then we're going to take our 4 millimeter hex socket, and we can go ahead and tighten these down all the way because we should not have to adjust this adapter. Okay, now, as you can see this other hole here in the heat shield, that's where we're going to mount our L bracket. So we're going to put the stud through the hole. Turn it around here for you. We're going to take another flat washer and the hex head nylon locking nut to secure that L bracket. And with our 10 millimeter socket, we're going to tighten that down. And I'm actually going to use my ratchet to tighten that down a little bit better. Okay, give it a little snug. Should be good. Go, and we can still adjust it as needed. For the next phase of this pre-assembly, we have some more of the supplied hardware, including this special Z bracket and rubber mounted stud, the heat shield lid, the part of the heat shield that we have already pre-assembled, and edge trim. I'm going to walk you through how to install all of this step by step. For the Z bracket, we're going to take one of our M6 by 12 millimeter hex bolts with a locking washer and flat washer, and our rubber mounted stud. And we are just going to put those together. Same fashion as the last rubber mounted stud that we did. So as you can see, it's threaded. Put our bolt through the bracket and hand tighten that. Again, we're gonna have to do some adjusting, so no need to tighten it all the way down. It's gonna look like that. Next, we're gonna take our heat shield lid and mount our bracket to it. So this hole right here on the heat shield is where our bracket's gonna go. And if you take a look on the bracket here, there is a welded bolt, if you will, threaded nipple. So we're gonna put that with the nipple side down on our heat shield. And then we're gonna take our M6 by 12 millimeter button head bolt with a locking washer and washer to secure the bracket onto the heat shield. Again, I'm just going to use my 4 millimeter hex socket just to snug that down just a little bit. And we still have room for adjustment. All right, for our edge trim, we're going to need measuring tape and a marker. And what we're going to do is measure a 6-inch piece and a 7-inch piece and cut, and that's going to go onto the heat shield itself. The remaining trim is going to go onto the heat shield lid. Okay, so like I said, we're going to do 6 inches first, which is right about there. And we're going to mark it because we only get one shot at this. Then from there, we're going to go to 7 inches, which is right about there. Mark it, and now we can cut. All right, with our edge trim measured twice, we're now gonna make our cuts. And I'm using a pair of dikes because there is a metal V-band in here, so you are gonna need something with a little bit of leverage power. I don't think a pair of scissors will work, so shears or dikes. And I'm gonna cut the squishy part first. So I do have to do this in 2 cuts, and then I'm gonna cut the metal V-band. One piece, and then the same for the 7-inch piece here. Quite go all the way through. All right, now for the metal part. So for the 2 short pieces of our edge trim that we cut, we're going to install these on the first piece of the heat shield that we assembled, and the short 6-inch piece of the trim is going to go on this side here. And it's easier to work one edge in at a time as opposed to trying to put the whole thing on at once. Then our 7-inch piece is going on this side. And be careful for sharp edges like this. Make sure you get those in the trash. Now for the remaining piece of the edge trim, it's gonna go on our heat shield lid. And we're gonna work it the whole way around this rounded edge here. Okay, and then down the flat side here as well. Now you might want to take it off and adjust it as you see fit. I'm going to continue with the pre-assembly and then decide where I want to move this later. Now we're in the front of the car where our filter is going to be located by the fuse box. And we have our heat shield with the filter adapter. And we're going to be mounting in this location right here. So these brackets that we put on earlier, we want to make sure that they're positioned downwards like this, both of them. And what we're going to do is we're going to mount these studs into the mounting holes, and we're going to have to make some adjustments. So let me show you how to do that. Okay, so we have our heat shield with the filter adapter, and we're locating it in the position where it's going to be mounted. One thing to note is it's much easier to have this L bracket pointed down when you're putting it into location. And the plastic studs that we mounted, we're locating them into the rubber grommets. So what we want to do here is push it into place and make sure that the heat shield is square and that our bracket lines up with the radiator support nut that's here right behind the radiator cap. And basically what we're doing is we're just locating all the bolts and the studs that we mounted because they are adjustable. So we're locating them by squaring everything up. Once that's done, lift it up and turn it around. And we can tighten these down now. Okay, so I'm going to tighten these down with my 10mm ratcheting wrench. If you don't have one of these, you can use a regular box end wrench. And the reason we didn't tighten these down before, the reason we kept them loose is because the brackets are slotted to make these adjustable so that you can keep everything square. So basically what we did when we pre-mounted it just now was locate these in the proper position. So now that we did that, we know that they're correctly positioned and tightened down. All right, now that our plastic studs are in position and tightened down, you can rotate this and put it back in place. Again, make sure this L bracket is facing down when you initially put it into place. Make sure everything's lined up, and then just give it a push to get those plastic studs into the rubber mounts. Double check to make sure everything's square. Make sure your bracket hole lines up with the radiator support hole. And we need 10mm socket and a 10mm wrench in order to tighten these down properly. It's a little tight in here, so you might have to finesse your way around. There we go. Okay, now we're at the L bracket, which gets fastened to the radiator support here. And we're gonna use the bolt that we removed prior. So this is the factory bolt. So make sure that our bracket hole's lined up. And also make sure that the rubber grommet that we're going through lines up with the radiator support nut. Then we're going to use our 10mm socket to tighten it the rest of the way down. You might need a longer extension because this is kind of tucked in there and there are a lot of threads. Okay, that one's good. And now that we have that fastened down, we can tighten down the bracket on the shield as well. We can tighten down the bracket on the shield as well using a 10mm wrench and our 10mm socket. Right, next we're going to put our filter in place. with the supplied clamp. And to tighten it down, we're using an 8mm socket. Or you can also use a flathead. This, you do not have to over tighten, you just want to make sure that it's snug. Just going to give it one little snug with my ratchet. Good. Now we can put the heat shield lid in place. A note here is this rubber stud has to come off. So just be careful removing the hardware. You don't want to lose anything. And the reason it has to come off is because we have to actually install it here first. And just by hand. Hand tight is good. Give it a snug. And now we can locate the heat shield lid bracket to that mounting point. And the reason we're locating that is because these back holes also have to line up. So before you go ahead and tighten that down, we can put the hardware in now actually. So let's do that. It's a little tricky, so just take it slow. Get a couple threads in. Good. So, like I was saying, the reason we want to do that is so that we can line up these back holes of the shield or of the lid with the heat shield. So everything has to be able to move a little bit. So once we locate a hole, let's get one of the bolts in. And we're using 3 of the M6 button head by M6 by 16mm button heads with washer and lock washer on each. And if your edge trim is in the way, just pull that to the side a little bit so you can get the bolt through. Locate your mounting hole. And with your 4mm hex socket, hand tighten that. Just needs a few threads. My edge trim is still in the way a little bit, so I'm going to move that even more. And you can actually pull it off and cut it if need be. For purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to leave it as it is. So we got our second M6 button head. And our third. Go ahead and get my socket on here. All right, now that our heat shield lid is in place, go ahead and tighten this bracket down using our 10mm socket. Good. And snug all the bolts on top, down as well. Next, we're going to put our hump hose with the supplied clamp onto our filter box. And then also we're going to take the silicone hose, put that on our throttle body with a supplied clamp. Now we're going to snug them down using our 8mm socket in preparation for the intake pipe. Now we're going to prep our K&N intake pipe along with a couple of brackets here. We're going to take our head tie wraps with the barb fitting on the other end and slide them into our brackets in this fashion. And there's 2. We'll be mounting those later. Next, we're gonna take our 90-degree half-inch NPT vent fitting and thread it into the K&N intake pipe. I do have to note, anytime you're threading plastic into metal, you have to be very careful. You don't want to over tighten it. So you want to hand tighten it and then position it in this general location, like that. Once that's done, take our vent tube and place that like so. Lastly, we want to take our inlet air temperature sensor that we took out of our factory intake pipe. We want to locate the tab on the sensor, and we're going to line it up with this little notch in the K&N intake pipe. So we line those up, and you have to give it a firm push in order to seat it. But again, you want to be careful. Once it's seated, rotate it clockwise, a little less than a quarter turn. All right, we're almost ready to drop our intake pipe into the vehicle. We have to put 2 of our brackets into place first, and then we can wrap this up with a couple clamps. All right, now we're gonna locate our L brackets with our zip ties onto our fan shroud right here, and we're gonna secure them using our M6 by 12 millimeter button head bolts, each with a washer and lock washer. And make sure they're oriented in this position. So that the zip ties are on the lower end of the bracket. And then with our 4 millimeter hex socket, and tighten them down the rest of the way. Now take the coolant return hose, place it on top of the zip ties. Use the zip ties to secure it in place. And then trim off the ends. That's good to go. All right, we're almost ready to place our intake pipe into our engine bay. First thing we want to do here is fit our clamps onto the silicone hoses. And we just want to position the intake pipe where it's going to be, because we have to connect the intake air temperature sensor connector. Now we're going to put the intake pipe into the silicone hoses. Now the other end of the pipe into the other silicone hose. And if you can get the bottom seated, like so, some of the silicone hose might fall in. So you want to grab a trim removal tool and work it the rest of the way around. And then also, if the clamp is too tight, that might be hindering you, so you might have to loosen that too. I got it just about worked around here. Okay, let's push that into place. All right, now we're going to take the vent return hose and plug that into the factory pipe. Now also, there is a factory rubber hose here, so if that's left behind, make sure you take that off first. Ours is already removed, so we can plug the K and N hose directly in. Last but not least, we have to tighten down the clamps using our 8mm socket. It's a good idea to check all the clamps, make sure everything is tight. You don't want to over tighten, but it should feel snug to your hand. Lastly, we can put our engine cover back on. And we're ready to go. That's going to wrap up this review and install of the K&N Series 77 High Flow Performance Cold Air Intake for the 12 to 18 Wrangler JK 3.6 liter V6. Thanks for watching, and for all things Wrangler, keep it right here at ExtremeTerrain.com.